It's time for your next favorite episode of the Integratedness Podcast with Jason and Jolene.
Welcome back to the Integratedness Podcast with Jason and Jolene. I am Jason.
And I'm Jolene.
And we're excited to have a guest back from season 2 at her request, which means we didn't suck, which is always a good thing. To talk about her new book that comes out in February. That's like next week. Welcome back, Julie McGue. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me back and Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. It is already. How's 2025 treating you?
Well, it's cold in Florida where I am right now, so
Cold in Florida. I never thought I'd hear those two words come together.
I know, isn't that wild? And cold is like I had to put socks on with my Crocs.
Yeah, no snowflakes, but it's
But are you not going somewhere much colder? Is this what I read in our email?
Yes, I am. And next week I'm headed to Patagonia and Antarctica.
Holy cow.
So in our next episode, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about how all of your writing and life kind of plans are rolling out and how you're merging the two, and just in general, you know, what this stage of life is. Because that's another thing we talk a lot about on this podcast is how we're like integrating into these new stages of life. And we talked a lot about that last time in part of your grief journey and adjusting what like life plans are. And now it sounds like you're embarking on even new stages of that as well. So I'm fascinated to chat about that.
It's kind of exciting to start the year like this with a new adventure. And I'm traveling with people that I know, 2 other couples, but just to get out and try a new experiences. We're going to be in Zodiacs, getting in and out of kayaks on the White Continent, and then going up the coast of Chile to Patagonia. So I got my camera ready. That's the other creative hat I wear besides writing. And I think once we get out of our own space and our own little world that we create for ourselves, we are open to new ideas and looking at things and from a different light. And I think that a perspective informs a writer's journey on the page.
I love that. We're going to dive more into that in the next one. Oh, cool.
Yeah, no, I totally relate to that, Julie. But yeah, let's talk about the new book, Twice the Family. Now, this is your 3rd book, am I correct?
This is the 3rd book, but this is the 2nd memoir. So this one actually came out of a lot of readers' requests. I was speaking to a lot of book clubs about Twice a Daughter, the first one, which was about the search for my birth parents, my twin sister and I. And this one, everybody was saying, well, what happened before this? You know, what was it like to grow up as a twin, as an adoptee? You were in this blended family of half of you were adopted persons and half of you were your parents' biological kids. What was that like? And what was it like to do that with a twin? So this was a lot of work writing this book because it was a long time ago and there were a lot of chapters that I had to collaborate with my twin sister. I collaborated with my mom, which is a story that I want to get into talking with you folks about today. So it was a lot of work going back and figuring out timelines. I learned a lot about my family and creating that timeline because there were things that I was harboring resentment about. And now as a parent and an adult, I look back and I say, how did my mom do that?
I love that.
How did she handle all of these challenges and all of these obstacles in creating this big family, which was their big goal? My parents wanted this big Catholic Irish family, and they had so many challenges, which I respect so much now as an adult and as a parent.
That is so cool, Julie. And I do that so much in my office because we're healing all of those younger resentments and what's been harbored and the different perspectives of how each person in the family experienced the life growing up, because it's different for everybody. And then to stand in the place that you are as the adult and appreciate it from the other side without lacking validation for your younger self of what you went through, and being able to hold both of those in the same experience is so, it's a sense of completion for many people, and contentment of kind of wrapping the bow around the box of validation, but also compassion too. So I really love that you experience that through your own journey of rewriting your story.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
for my mom, she was one of the first people to read the book because there's some sensitive chapters around a younger sister passing away. And I think she looked at it from my perspective, but it also validated everything that she went through. It's like, yes, it was a reckoning, I think, for my family to write about this. As my daughter said, this is like a piece of family history. We don't even have to get digging into it because you already did the work, Mom.
It's true. It's true. And that is some of the most valuable like healing you can pass down to other generations, so they can understand why you're, you know, the mom that you are, or why you're the partner or the friend or whatever, right? Yeah.
There's one point I'd like to get into here, and it was one of the kind of questions that, because I wish I'd had time to read the entire book, and I will before the interview. This came together really quick, but it's something about you and your twin sister being adopted. What role did nature versus nurture play in your development? Because I know once I discovered I was adopted and started meeting like my birth family, there are so many similarities. Like I always felt like not quite a Hewlett because the Hewletts are very much a certain type, and I was very different. And even like when my brother Bill and I went to this dress up function for the family, we both dressed like pretty much exactly the same, but we didn't plan it. We didn't talk about it. We just ended up with the same kind of white shirts and tan pants and stuff like that. So there was definitely, I realized how much like nature is present, even though you've been adopted and brought up in a different family. What have you found, and what kind of is covered in that sense in the book?
Well, in the book, I'm so lucky that I have this twin sister and that we were placed for adoption together, because the two of us would enter any situation knowing we had each other's back, but also that we understood our reactions were going to be the exact same reaction, and almost always they were. With compassion or anger, or hey, let's get the heck out of here. This just doesn't feel right. I've been reading a book about twin studies, and my sister and I participated in a twin studies program when we were in college. And it's so interesting. They have found that identical twins reared apart, were actually more alike than identical twins that were raised together. Because I think what we do is we try to be different from one
That,
another, to individuate, right? To be
yeah.
this separate individual, whereas twins reared apart, they're just being who they are. And one of the things I noticed when my sister and I met my birth mom, oh my gosh, some of the mannerisms, hand gestures, facial expressions, um, the ability to just stand back before speaking. I mean, there are so many nature things that we noticed in getting to know her. We don't have any other siblings through our birth mom. We were it for her. But I have met my half brother, which is, one of the story reveals in Twice a Daughter. And he has the same sense of humor as my sister and I. And that was one of the things that he said to Jen. And I was like, you guys really get me, because he is a little off with his sense of humor. But we do get him, and we do giggle at him. And I think he appreciates a receptive audience.
That is so neat. And I totally agree with you, Julie, because my daughters are identical, and they are so different. My one daughter likes to dress in all boy things. She has they have so many similarities together and can mesh so beautifully, but they do individuate. And that just happened very naturally. At like 18 months, she would hide boys' clothes behind the door, all my son's hand-me-downs, and just like started choosing to wear very different things. And she loves her older brother much more than the other girl does. But it's so interesting to see that, yet they are besties and feel each other's pain physically, somatically. They feel what the other person's feeling without always making that connection that that's what's happening. But I agree with you in that theory that if they're together, they need to be separate. They want to be seen as two separate entities.
Yeah, and I think as a parent of twins, it's interesting. My mom said to me one time, I can't ever get in between the two of you. And I thought that was an interesting thing to say. Our spouses didn't have any trouble with us being twins, but for some reason, that mother-daughter relationship, you want it to be like really close. I have 3 daughters. But my mom, for some reason, thought that she could be part of this little girl twin thing. And we weren't trying to be exclusive. It's just something you can't help. You just look at somebody and go, yeah, and there's no conversation, but your twin gets exactly what you're telegraphing to them.
I love that. Yeah, mine comfort each other in ways I can't comfort them. Yeah. Oh,
That kind of ties into another point here, like sort of when you guys were going through, like you're growing up and maturing and going through college and picking career paths and everything. In the book, I guess you talk about how you made choices different from the traditional values that your parents had. Can you talk a bit about that? It ties, I guess, into the nature nurture thing again.
Well, without giving too much away, there was a couple situations that happened in college, and there was a lot of sex, and it was a big college campus, and kind of an open dorm, even though it wasn't supposed to be. So there was a lot of guys around, and we were on at this school because we wanted more than this restrictive Catholic environment that we were raised in. But it was also eye-opening. And then there were some choices that we both had to make about whether we wanted to be involved in something that was happening on the dorm floor or not. My sister had not a bad roommate, but a situation that made her uncomfortable that she had to get out of. So some really strong things right off the back for 2 little Catholic girls right out of Catholic high school. And it was a big world, but we were ready for it because we were doing it together, and we validated each other by saying, yeah, you should get a new roommate. Yeah. This is cool.
How come you two weren't roommates?
We didn't want to be. We wanted to be in the same dorm, but not roommates. And I had a great roommate. My sister spent a lot of time in our room. Because she had this roommate situation going on. And the 3 of us were kind of a threesome everywhere for the first 6 months of college.
Neat.
Did it kind of like having your twin there, I guess, make going off to college easier, Julie? Because that can be a huge step, right? No matter who you are.
Right. When we were so independent, but also because we were doing it together. When I was writing the book, my editor said, you should put a little bit more, how sad it was saying goodbye to your parents. We were like, bye, go, we're fine. We want to be by ourselves. We want to get to know our roommates. And I was sad to see them go, but I'm sure it was sadder for my mom and dad to be looking around the kitchen table and 2 people are gone, right? 2 people that you relied on. And we were off having fun. First semester of college. It was great.
There's kind of two, and it ties into the rule of 3. So you're talking in the book about these really traumatic events. One that like Jolene and I can relate to, a plane crash, because we had one crash in our neighborhood, like just blocks from where we are right now. There was like something about an encounter with male predators plus a murder. Can you get into those 3 things? The former crime reporter and was really excited about all that, actually.
When you're growing up, you think, okay, yeah, this is my childhood. This is what I'm doing. And when I would mention, oh yeah, we had a kid in our neighborhood murdered. Another family, he was a pilot and he took off on a trip with some other neighbors. And the plane went down and it took a while to find the plane and figure out if they were alive or not. And then my own family had a tragedy. My younger sister got sick, and passed away very suddenly. So these 3 things happened right around the same time. So like within a couple years. And my grandmother had this expression, bad things come in 3s. And, I didn't know if that was an old wives' tale or just something my grandma said, but it has stuck with me. over time that I almost look for that third thing now. And it goes for three things of joy too. Like right now, I moved into a new condo. I'm going on this trip. The book is coming out. So I think the rule of threes can be negative and positive. That's how I look at it. But I think my grandma was right.
It's something that I grew up knowing as well, is like, yeah, think bad news comes in threes, or bad news travels in threes, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's interesting too, right? Because we look at cycles and what some of those common denominators are when things keep repeating themselves, right? I do this ton in my office of, why has this come full circle again, but showing up in a different character, a different form, a different story, right? But the theme is the same, right? And it's interesting because I wonder if it's around family cohesiveness, things that can bring or break the family. And it's around what each of those kind of ruptures do, right? Families are so big. When we look at a lot of family work, a lot of it's around ruptures and repairs. So if you scanned your life to see where some of the family ruptures were, how well were they repaired? And what does that look like, even in terms of you, as you started to raise your children, or now being a grandma and things like that? What does repair look like differently, right? And I think back in those days, we didn't repair well. I think we repair so much better now. We're able to say, sorry, we messed up. I tell my kids on the daily, right? So I wonder if some of those instances were threats of connection, perhaps in your family, where it could have went either way.
Yeah, and you're so right about the repair. My after my sister died, my mom really struggled with some mental health issues, depression, understandably, and it took her a while to get some help. We never got any help, the rest of us, the five of us. There was no, let's take the kids to counseling and let's have this family session to see where everybody was. It was go do your homework, go to school. There weren't mental health days off. Everybody pitched in. And I think it took a while for us to grieve properly and to be able to look back and say, this was a really tough time for a family. We did make it through all of that. My parents were married 64 years. A lot of times, loss of a child is very bad on the marriage, but they did stay married. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to come out from the book is these family values that while growing up, they felt very restricted to me. And those values were the ones that got us through this. You've got your brother's back, family comes first, never lie, do all your chores, like all of these basic core values that don't sound a lot, but when they're upheld, and believe me, they were upheld or you were in your room, it made an impact on how important they were. Honesty was a big value, but there's a scene in the book, I don't know if you've gotten to it yet. It's about a family vacation. My sister and I are out on a walk, which my mom knew where we were going, and we were gone too long. And she sent my brother looking for us. And he shows up towards the end of a very upsetting episode. We ran into a couple of strangers on a trail, and they were very aggressive. I'm not sure if I'd been by myself, it would have ended up the way that it did. It ended up fine, but it was a very scary thing. But here's my brother, kind of the bully of the neighborhood and a real tough guy. And he was gonna do some damage if he saw these guys. So that family comes first value was very strong in our family and our upbringing.
That's, I know, becoming a very big conversation about it right now. And it ties into belonging, which was going to be the next point I wanted to bring up, is that is something why I think religion has sort of prevailed for as long as it has, even, with the rise of science, is that at its core, it instills values in people. And that's something right now that I think in our society is highly lacking. Like, it's more about how do you feel, which is good because we didn't talk about feelings, as you pointed out, but there needs to be that balance of where value should overrule feelings in certain ways, and where how important it is to know even as an individual what your values are, because that will serve you better in life.
Yeah, moral rule books, right?
Yeah.
I think that we do lack a lot of that structure in how we are. Yeah, it comes out in a work ethic. It comes out in relationship dynamics, lack of respect and kindness and compassion in some ways too. Yeah, absolutely. Julie, before we wrap up this episode here, I'm curious what your biggest gift to yourself was writing this book, as well as what your hopes are to the readers for writing this book.
Oh, I gained so much understanding about my mother and so much more forgiveness for her for things that I didn't think she did right back then, which I realize, that's the human condition. There's only so much you can do when you've got 6 kids to take care of and pay attention to. And I would urge the readers to do their own little family timeline and kind of put some events in order, and maybe some grace will come from that.
I love that.
Beautiful.
I love that. It's true, because when we are able to really inventory things, and, I tell people all the time how you experience this one thing, just like I put a mug in the middle of the room and say, everyone draw a picture of it. Everyone has a different picture of the mug, and nobody's wrong. Nobody's right and nobody's wrong. That's what it is from that angle. And that is what it's like growing up with that many people. And I tell my kids all the time, I have a lot of clients that worry about, oh, well, am I doing something wrong with my kids, or I'm not meeting their needs here? I said, you're never going to meet everyone's needs. That is just by default. It's not because you're being a poor parent or you should do anything different. It is just happens by default. I have 3 kids. If one of them needs me, if 3 of them need me at the same time, the one with the most urgent priority, or the one who needs to get triaged in that moment, is going to get my attention. And by default, the other 2 will not have their needs met. It does not mean they're not loved. It does not mean they're not worthy of it. It means that in that moment, it is physically not possible to help all 3.
Right.
And I tell them that all the time, because they will say to me, you don't love me because you helped her with that, or nobody loves me, or I'm always the one who has to do this by myself. We talk openly about it all the time, because there's one of me and 3 and a 20-year-old of all of them. So I explain all the time, I'm not doing this because I'm choosing someone over you. This is how I've sequenced it in my head. And I'm sorry that you had to do that part by yourself. And I'm here now. And we talk very openly about that, because no matter what, children will always look at how they are directly impacted. They're pretty egotistical at that stage, right? And honestly, I will tell them, you know what? I don't keep track of who I'm helping, but the fact that you said 4 times I helped that one instead of you, you're probably right. And I never noticed. And thank you for telling me that, instead of the reactive, I'm trying to help everybody, blah, blah. I mean, they get that sometimes, don't get me wrong, right? But I really try to validate, because the reality is I don't count who I've helped. And it is quite possible that one kid didn't get me 5 times in a row. Very possible. Yeah.
Well, we're going to continue this conversation next episode, because we have a bunch more questions for Julie about her Antarctic adventure and senses of belonging. So until then, I'm Jason.
And I'm Jolene. And that's Julie.
Julie. We'll talk to y'all again next week.